All right. In the interest of time, we're going to kick things off. My name is Lindsay Clark. I'm Director of External Affairs here at Savi, and I oversee all of our consumer and borrower education and have been giving webinars like these almost on a not quite daily, but definitely weekly basis since about 2018. And really excited for you all to join us here today. This is one of our monthly all-user workshops that we offer to all Savi users, where we sort of recap what's been going on in the world of student loans, and then help you to sort of understand how you can utilize the Savi tools and resources to assist you, whatever you might be pursuing. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. For those of you who might be, this might be your first time, welcome. I know we have oftentimes some repeat attenders, which is great. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, usually these are a smaller group, 30, 40 people or so, which is great. And so I encourage you to ask those either in the chat or the Q&A. And I'm going to be trying my best to pause periodically throughout the presentation and either address some of those out loud. So just be mindful, if you're comfortable with me reading some of those questions out loud. If not, please put that in your question. I'd like this to remain private. And we can sort of take that answer offline. But like I said, I want this to feel as interactive and helpful as possible. And hopefully all of you can walk away after this hour feeling at least better about your student debt, but with a sort of a clear direction as to what to do next. So I'm first just going to briefly introduce who we are here at Savi. Again, for those who this might be their first time. And just FYI, I forgot to mention this session is being recorded. And so you can receive a copy of this recording after the presentation. So if you have to hop off at any point, no worries, you can receive a copy of that. So I'm first just going to briefly introduce who we are here at Savi, and then I'm going to dive right into sort of an overview, basically some of the pandemic related relief that's been going on. And then I'm going to talk about one of the big programs that I know many Savi users, if not most, are eligible for, which is around public service loan forgiveness. We're going to talk about some of the major changes that have been happening with that program and how hopefully most of you are able to maximize your forgiveness under this limited waiver period is what they're calling it. And then sort of the last part of the presentation is where I'm going to sort of show you how to utilize your Savi account, get that activated, make the most of it, and what's available to you. All right, so before we go any further, just wanted to take a quick second to introduce who we are here at Savi. I think it's important because there are a lot of, I would say, less than reputable actors out there in the student debt space, a lot of scams and things like that. So it's just important to know, why we are such a trusted resource and who we are and why we do what we do. So Savi is a social impact technology startup based and founded in Washington, D.C. We were founded by policy experts and advocates who had been fighting on behalf of the borrower for almost a decade. And in 2017, this was the first year that borrowers could start applying for this big forgiveness program called public service loan forgiveness. And our founders saw that over 100,000 people had applied and less than 1% were accepted. So they decided to try to do something about it. And they founded Savi as a technology platform and a service to help borrowers like yourselves and like me to not only better navigate through that process, but actually reach the finish line around programs like public service loan forgiveness. Not only do we help with forgiveness, but we also help with unlocking additional savings through things like income-driven repayment plans. And really the goal being there to minimize your monthly payment and maximize that forgiveness. We're a registered public benefit corporation, which means it exists in our mission and charter to serve the public benefit. And that's exactly why we do things like this here today. We host educational webinars and workshops, on a weekly basis with our various partners and communities of borrowers across the country to help better educate and inform borrowers. Because if there's one thing I know as a borrower myself, when you are more informed about your debt, you are more empowered as a consumer. So that's exactly why we're here today. All right, so I'm going to sort of dive in right now. I know this is a lot that you're seeing on the screen, but I'm going to walk through each of these points. These are basically the most important things that you as a borrower need to know right now. All right, so, some of these are going to be challenges and opportunities that are going to be presented over sort of the next 6 months. But here's sort of a summary recap of the major things that have been going on and things you should be aware of. So first and foremost, let's talk about the payment pause. So back in March of 2020, when the CARES Act went into effect right at the height of the pandemic, payments were paused and interest was waived. So that's payments $0, interest 0% on the majority of federal student loans out there, okay? And it has since been extended 6 times. Most recently, it was extended through August 31st of 2022, meaning that after a little over 2 years of payments being paused, borrowers are currently scheduled to resume making payments starting September of this year. All right, so again, the payment pause has been extended through August 31st. So as of right now, payments are scheduled to resume starting in September of this year, 2022. Now, could that payment pause be extended again? It absolutely could. I mean, it's already been extended 6 times. And if it is extended again, you will be the first to hear from Savi. You will have an email in your inbox letting you know what's going on. We've notified borrowers literally within hours of these announcements being made each time. So, whether or not you are following news closely, it is something that we are going to help make sure that you are aware of. Moving on, I want to talk about why this period during payment pause is so important, especially for borrowers who basically are working towards public service loan forgiveness. So for every month that payments have been paused from March of 2020 through what will be August 31st of 2022, that's 30 months and 30 free PSLF credits towards the 120 total that you need to achieve full forgiveness of your loan balance. Okay. Now, I've found many people are either misinformed or confused about this and have sometimes actually opted to continue making payments during this time because they thought that they needed to, and that's not the case. And you can actually apply to have a refund of any payments you made during that period of time. So again, for those borrowers who are trying to pursue public service loan forgiveness, if you've been working in a full-time capacity during this time, you are able to have those payments, or I should say, all of those payments or months of payment pause counted towards the 120 total that you need. So that's significant because that's going to put you about 1/5 of the way closer towards receiving full forgiveness on the remainder of your loan balance without having to have made a payment at all. All right, moving on, I wanted to talk about federal servicer transitions. So just to back up and give some context here, federal servicers are companies like Navient, Nelnet, Great Lakes, Mohila. There are about 9 to 10 total federal servicers out there. These companies are contracted by the Department of Education in the repayment and management of your student loan. So this is the account that you log into online to set up your payment and your auto debit, let's say, things like that. Now, just to clarify, Savi is not a servicer. Savi acts as more of a facilitator or an intermediary on your behalf. So we might do things like submit an application on your behalf or get on the phone with you and your servicer to resolve an issue, but we would never take over that role of your servicer. You would never start making monthly payments to Savi. Now, when it comes to these federal servicers, over the last year or two, 3 of the largest federal servicers out there basically announced that they are not going to renew their federal contracts. And so because of that, any borrowers that were serviced by those servicers are going to need to be transitioned to other servicers. So this has been going on since probably about the end of last year is when most of these transitions started. And it's going to continue through the end of this year, maybe even into next, because the Department of Education can only transition, a certain amount of loans and a certain amount of borrowers each month. So if you had Navient federal loans, you are going to be transitioned to Advantage. If you had Granite State, you're going to Ed Financial. And if you had Fed loan, you are going to Mohila. And one of the important things to note about Mohila and Fed loan is that the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, PSLF, was exclusively managed by Fed loan up until July 1st of this year. As of July 1st, a couple days ago, it is now being managed by Mohila. So any forms or applications that you want to submit around public service loan forgiveness will now need to go to Mohila, and borrowers who are looking to pursue the program, their loans will either be automatically transitioned to Mohila, or once you submit that application or documentation, your loans will then be transitioned to Mohila as well. Okay, so that's just important for anyone out there pursuing public service loan forgiveness. All right, last but not least, and we're going to talk in more detail about this in a second, I wanted to mention the Pslf limited waiver. So back in October of last year, October 2021, the Department of Education came out with a big announcement around the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. They essentially called it the Pslf limited waiver. Okay. Basically, what that limited waiver entails is an expansion of the eligibility requirements for sort of a 1-year period of time. So from last October, to this coming October 31st, 2022, during which borrowers are essentially able to take advantage of sort of this expanded eligibility. And we're going to talk about this in more detail in a second, in order to maximize their forgiveness eligibility. All right. And so this deadline is October 31st of this year. And don't worry, like I said, I'm going to talk in more detail on this in a second about exactly what you need to do to take advantage of this, but just sort of wanted to headline that here. Okay, I see a couple questions that came through in the chat that I wanted to address. So the first one, someone asked, are you going to talk about the updates that happened today? So this is a great question. Today, there was an announcement from the Department of Education regarding some of the overhauls that the department is planning around student debt. Now, these have been loosely announced over the past year, all right? So this was something that wasn't generally new. However, it's the first time that they've addressed some of these in more detail. And as we get more information, and this goes out to Morgan and others, we will be updating you all on that, because as of right now, they're just sort of still plans. But what's important to note for any borrowers, I would say, specifically those that are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, is that they're now looking to include eligibility for periods where you may have been in a deferment or forbearance, which is going to be huge. They're also looking at restructuring the way that things like capitalized interest are going to impact borrowers. So we're holding off on sort of giving any huge updates on that right now, just because, like I said, it's still sort of all in the, I would say, the planning phases, and we haven't heard of anything being implemented right away. All right, but we will keep you posted absolutely as those details, become more clear. Another question I saw come through: if all of the Ecfs or employment certification forms went to FedLoan, will they transfer that to Mohila for us, or do we need to start the process over? So great question. Those should all be transferred to Mohila. All right. So you're going to want to keep an eye on, if you've had a FedLoan account, you're going to want to keep an eye on when, your transition happens, that all of your credits are there. Okay. And perhaps, it should, listen, I say, this optimistically, but the servicers have not always processed things how they should. So you just want to be mindful of what your account is saying. But yes, all of that should process over. Okay. I'm laughing at Haley's reactions, some emoji reactions that were pretty funny. All right. I saw a couple more questions related to some of these things that I wanted to get to as well. So someone asked, I didn't know about the payment pause, so I've been making monthly payments the whole time. Can I be reimbursed for those payments? So the payment pause should have been instituted automatically to your account if you had an eligible loan type. So Jennifer, this goes out to you. That means you would have had to, basically be manually making those payments, or you would have had to have called to basically take yourself off of the payment pause. Now, if they weren't automatically paused for you, that might be an indication that you have an older loan type that didn't qualify for the payment pause. And so you had payments due anyway. So we'd really want to check to see what type of loan you had, because that would sort of determine what your next steps would be. Okay, last question here that I'll address, and then I'm going to keep on moving on. I have two servicers, Nelnet and Navient. Can I consolidate my loans with Nelnet before the period expires? So if you're interested in pursuing public service loan forgiveness, you're going to want to actually consolidate with Mohila. That is the sole servicer for the public service loan forgiveness program. And so that's going to be the servicer where your loans will move anyway. So if you tried to go and consolidate online, they're going to ask you, are you pursuing public service loan forgiveness? And, if you answer yes, then they will sort of pre-select for you Mohila. All right. Okay. I'm going to get back to the presentation, but don't worry, we're going to have enough time to answer more questions as we continue on. All right, so I wanted to really dive in a little bit deeper on some of these big changes that have been happening around public service loan forgiveness. And, for those who might not be pursuing the program, we have additional webinars and content that might be more helpful. But I know the majority of our Savi users are public service employees and workers. And because this program is so important, and there have been some major changes that are going to, I think, impact everyone who's trying to apply, I want to make sure that we at least sort of walk everyone through what's been going on. So I mentioned that there was this big overhaul to the program last October, but they're calling this Pslf limited waiver. So to sort of understand what changes were made and instituted, I think it's first helpful to start with an understanding of the public service loan forgiveness before. And what we mean by before is before that limited waiver went into effect, right? So this is sort of the original rules of the program and why it sort of failed so many borrowers. So public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF, is essentially full forgiveness on the remainder of your loan balance, whatever that may be. Okay, it could be $5,000, it could be $500,000, doesn't matter. Tax-free, so there are no tax implications here, right? After you have made 120 qualifying payments. Now, if you could see me right now, you'd see that I'm doing qualifying payments in air quotes, because the devil is really in the details here as to what constitutes a qualifying payment. And it really comes down to three things that you see on your screen here. These sort of three categories around employment, loan type, and repayment plan. Excuse me. Now, before I talk more in depth about each of those categories, I first wanted to clarify a few things about these 120 qualifying payments, some common misconceptions. So number one, you do not need to make 120 consecutive payments. You just need to reach 120 qualifying payments cumulatively. Okay, so you just need to get to 120 total. So let's say you worked for a qualifying public service employer for 2 years and accumulated 24 credits towards PSLF. And then you left and went to work in the private sector or took time off. Nothing happens to those credits. They simply pause. And if you were to ever resume your eligibility, you'd be able to resume accumulating those credits. All right. So again, you don't need to make 120 qualifying payments in a row, or if you miss a payment here or there, that's okay. You just need to get to 120 total. However, the one thing about these 120 qualifying payments is that you can only receive one qualifying payment credit per one calendar month per one payment, meaning you can't double up on payments in a month and get 2 credits. In any given calendar year of 12 months, the maximum amount of PSLF credits you can receive is 12. Okay, so if you need to get to 120, right, you can only get 12 credits a year. You guys do the math, right? That's 10 years at the earliest that you could achieve forgiveness. Okay, and that's if you are making those payments consecutively, which again, you don't need to. All right. So again, you can only basically receive a max of 12 per year. So you can't receive forgiveness any earlier than at least 10 years. And that's why many people think of this as a 10-year program. However, it could absolutely take you longer. Now, what constitutes a quote unquote qualifying payment? Well, like I said, it comes down to these 3 things that you need to achieve simultaneously. Now, again, I'm reviewing this, and these are the original rules of the program, which have, under this limited waiver period of time for this 1 year, changed. And we're going to talk about how they changed in a second. But first, I want to help you understand what those original rules were. So number 1, your qualifying employer. So you must work for any government organization at any level, federal, state, local, or tribal, or any non-for-profit 501c3. The only stipulation here is that you must work a minimum of 30 hours or more a week. Now, let's say you work part-time for one qualifying employer, let's say a hospital, and part-time at another hospital that's also a qualifying employer. So long as both employers are considered qualifying employers, so long as combined you're working 30 hours or more a week, you can be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So you don't just need to work full-time at one employer, right, in order to be eligible. You can combine employment in order to be eligible. Again, so long as all of the employers are eligible and qualifying and you are making or working a minimum of 30 hours or more a week. All right, so that's qualifying employment. Number two, qualifying loan type. Under the original rules of the program, the only loan type that qualified for public service loan forgiveness was a direct federal loan, okay? Now, the direct loan program, this is a type of federal loan, began in 2010. This is basically when the Department of Education took over financing all of these loans, all right? So if you have a loan from 2010 to present, there's a very good chance that it is a direct loan, okay? And it's really easy to tell. It'll usually say the word direct in the title or DL, which stands for direct loan. Now, as far as loans that didn't qualify, so if you had a loan prior to 2010, there's a very good chance that it could have been known what's called a FFEL loan, FFEL, which stands for Federal Family Education Loan, or FFELP, okay? It's Federal Family Education Loan Program, same thing. These loans were the loan program in existence prior to 2010. Now, if you had a FFEL loan and attempted to apply for public service loan forgiveness up until this waiver period, you would have been rejected and told that you need to consolidate that loan into an eligible loan type, which is a direct loan, in order for it to become eligible. And only after the point of consolidation would you be able to start accumulating qualifying credits. So let me tell you how this played out in real life. The Pslf program started in October of 2007, okay? So that's sort of the beginning of any eligible work or payments or anything like that that you want to think about in your mind. October 1, 2007, okay, to present day. So if it started October 2007, 10 years later, October 2017 was the first year that borrowers could start applying and receiving forgiveness. And as I mentioned before, over 100,000 people applied and less than 1% were accepted. And one of the reasons being was because of technicalities like loan type, and we'll talk about in a second, repayment plan. You had borrowers that whole time had FFEL loans. And it wasn't until they applied that they were told, oh, sorry, that's not eligible. You're rejected. You need to consolidate that loan and now work another 10 years and make another 120 qualifying payments in order to be eligible. And to say that this was frustrating for borrowers was probably the understatement of the century. There was so much misinformation out there. Borrowers were being told the wrong things by their servicers. And as a result, this is why we had such a low acceptance rate on this program early on, right? So again, that qualifying loan type was important, and most borrowers didn't even know what type of loan they had. They didn't even think that that was something important. You probably had been staring at the words direct or FFEL, on your screen and just thought nothing of it, which is totally normal, not anyone's fault at all. So that was something that kept borrowers out of the program. The other thing, and last part here, is qualifying repayment plan. So not only did you have to have a qualifying loan type, a direct loan, but you needed to be repaying that loan on a qualifying repayment plan. And the only repayment plans that qualified were what are called income-driven repayment plans, or IDR. There are a few different types of income-driven repayment plans, didn't matter which one, but you needed to make that payment on time and for the full monthly amount on an income-driven repayment plan. So unless you satisfied all three of these things simultaneously, you weren't going to be getting a credit for towards that 120 to achieve public service loan forgiveness. So you had borrowers who were working more than 30 hours a week for a qualifying institution, thinking that they were going to be eligible that whole time, and told up because you didn't have the right loan type or because you didn't have the right repayment plan, that unfortunately none of those payments counted. And you basically either need to start over, or you're only going to get credit from the period going forward where you are on the right repayment plan or have the right loan type. So these technicalities prevented borrowers from getting forgiveness and from the promise of the program being delivered. And that promise was simple. If you work in public service for 10 years or more, you can have your loans forgiven. And that's just not how it worked out for so many borrowers. So as a result, in October, finally, it took about from 2017 until 2021 for the Department of Education to really get its act together around this and they announced what they were calling this Pslf limited waiver. This is what they announced last October 6th, 2021. And essentially what it did was it opened up sort of a year-long period of time where they were willing to expand these eligibility requirements so that borrowers could retroactively get credit for payments made that under the normal requirements of the program would have been ineligible. Okay. And I'm going to sort of go through how this eligibility is changed under this waiver in those same three categories: employment, loan type, repayment plan. Now, one thing that I always get asked on webinars, and very understandable, is, does that mean I need to reach the 120 before this coming October 31st, before this deadline? And no, absolutely not at all. What it means is that if you want to have your case reviewed under this expanded eligibility to sort of maximize your potential forgiveness, right, you need to take certain action before October 31st of this year. So whether you've never submitted an application before, whether you have and it was rejected, you are going to want to make sure that you have certified your full employment. And we're going to talk about what that entails in a second, before October 31st. That is the only way to ensure that they will review your situation now under these sort of more lenient eligibility requirements, and that you're going to be able to get the maximum amount of credits that you deserve for payments that previously might not have counted. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So when we say public service loan forgiveness after, this is sort of how it has changed under this waiver, okay? Now, we've been given no indication of what's going to happen after this waiver deadline, October 31st, which makes it even more important and a good thing that you're attending this webinar now so that you can take action and make sure that you, like I said, are maximizing that forgiveness. So when it comes to qualifying employer, this one hasn't changed much. You still need to work for any government organization or a non-for-profit 501c3, and you still need to work a minimum of 30 hours or more a week. The only thing that has changed here is that you can actually now be retired or no longer working when you try to apply for public service loan forgiveness, okay? So previously under the program, you actually had to still be working at whatever qualifying employer you were working at the time you were submitting your final application. You had reached the 120. Now you no longer have to be. So this is going to help borrowers who, let's say perhaps they had made 120 payments, but because of some of these technicalities, they were deemed ineligible and are now retired. Well, now we're seeing borrowers who are able to retroactively apply and get the forgiveness that they deserved all along. All right, number two, qualifying loan type. So remember how I said initially you could only have a direct federal loan? Well, now you can actually have a FFEL loan as well as direct loan. So any payments you made while you had a FFEL loan are also able to count as well during this period of time. All right. So that means, I know many people have been told when you consolidate, things start over, right? That's not the case under this waiver. However, if you have a FFEL loan, you still need to consolidate. And this goes out to Beth, who asked this question. You still need to consolidate before you apply, because you will be rejected if you do not have a direct loan. So they're now willing to basically count the payments you made when you had that FFEL loan, but it still needs to be consolidated into a direct loan. All right. Now, just by maybe a quick raise of hands, how many of you on the call have a Parent Plus loan? You're able to. Okay. I see a couple of you. So Parent Plus loans, and I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about this, but we also have a webinar. It's in our, it should be in our Savi Resource Center that was dedicated just to Parent Plus loans. But Parent Plus loans are essentially loans taken out by a parent on behalf of a child, but in the parent's name. Now, Parent Plus loans can become eligible for public service loan forgiveness. However, they require consolidation. You have to consolidate that loan into a direct consolidation loan. However, Parent Plus loans were not included in this limited waiver, which means unlike a FFEL loan now, where if you consolidate it, okay, you're able to count the payments made before the consolidation. That's not the case with Parent Plus loans. You are basically starting back at zero once you consolidate. I mean, none of the payments before counted anyway. But if you've been working for a public service entity, you need to consolidate that loan as soon as possible so that you can start accumulating qualifying credits towards forgiveness. All right, last but not least, on repayment plan, Now, under this limited waiver, okay, they are willing to give credit for any payments made on any type of repayment plan. Income driven, standard, extended, graduated, doesn't matter. And it doesn't necessarily even have to have been for the full or on-time amount. They are being very lenient as to what they're sort of willing to give credit for here. So really, any payments in the past can count towards your loan. So I know this is a lot. So I'm sort of going to sort of recap how you can think about this, or how I know it's been helpful for me to explain it to people that I talk to. So you want to think about it in terms of your time frame of eligibility here, right? October 1, 2007 is when the program started. So even if you've been working in public service since 1995 and paying on loans since then, unfortunately, everything from 1995 up until October 2007 is irrelevant for the purposes of the program. You're only able to start getting credit for anything October 1, 2007 through present day. All right, so that's sort of your eligible time frame. Now, in that time frame, you want to think about, did I have student loans? Okay. Was I working for a qualifying employer? All right, more than 30 hours a week. And was I making payments on those student loans? Okay. And if you were making payments while working for a qualifying employer, those are eligible PSLF credits now. All right. And so you are going to want to take one action and one action only. All right. For those that need to consolidate, you're first going to need to consolidate that loan into a direct loan. But then after that, you are going to want to submit the PSLF form. There is one form and one form only for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Some call it the PSLF form, some call it the Employment Certification Form, or ECF. Essentially, it is a form that gets signed off by you, the borrower, and then it gets signed off by your employer, current or any previous employment you might have had. So if you've worked for 5 hospitals since 2007, that you believe are all qualifying, you're going to need to submit 5 employment certification forms for each one of those periods of employment. Okay. You want to make sure that, yes, and this is the same form. There's no form for the limited waiver. There's no form for the limited waiver. This is the one and only form for public service loan forgiveness. So if you want to take advantage of the waiver, that's the form you have to submit. And you're going to want to make sure that you cover your full employment history. Okay. Because that's the only way you're going to be able to get credit for that full period of time. All right. So you're going to want to make sure that you have certified your full employment history, and then you're going to want to submit that to Mohila servicing. That is the action that anyone, and I would say don't self-select here, because many borrowers, there's been so much misinformation and a lot changing about this program that borrowers who either may have been previously rejected or thinking they're not eligible, I hate to see them not take action just because of what they might have been told before, what they think might be the case. I would say don't leave it to chance. You want to submit these employment certification forms for your full employment history. And that's going to be the one and only way in which to ensure that you are fully reviewed under this sort of PSLF limited waiver. All right, so let's just talk a bit about the impact of this waiver and sort of the progress that borrowers have made to date. So about 145,000 borrowers so far have received forgiveness since October 2021. And so these are people who were at the 120. Because of now, basically, the expanded eligibility, they were able to get a ton more credits and payments counted from the past, right? That put them either at or over 120, and they were able to get their loans forgiven. Now, that compares to just 17,000 people who received forgiveness from basically October 2017 up until the month before the waiver was announced. All right, so it's really impacted a ton of people. I would say there are about 500,000 borrowers who are sort of already in progress towards PSLF. And what I mean by that is they've submitted a PSLF form or employment certification form, one and the same. They were with FedLoan, right? They're about to be moved to Mohila, and they're somewhere tracking towards the 120. They've got 20 credits, 80, 100, they're somewhere in progress. But because of this waiver, they've received an additional, on average, 2 years of credits towards that 120. Now, this is key. We looked at the data, and there are about 250,000 borrowers who have submitted applications since October of 2021, but did not receive forgiveness, okay? And by applications, we mean these PSLF employment certification forms. They haven't received forgiveness because they have yet to consolidate their loans. So these are people who have an older loan type, a FFEL loan, let's say, who could be eligible for forgiveness, but they first need to consolidate that loan, okay? And then they can submit those forms. But here's the biggest thing that I would say, biggest takeaway from this, is that we estimate 25% of all student loan borrowers work in public service at qualifying employers, which means there are millions and millions of people. There are 46 million borrowers total, right? Millions and millions of people who are eligible potentially to take advantage of this and who need to certify their employment in order to sort of get into this program, but haven't done that yet. All right. So really it's about awareness and understanding exactly what you need to do, especially before October 31st, when this waiver deadline ends. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a quick pause here. I know we've gotten some questions before I sort of transition into how Savi can help you with this process. I just wanted to take a quick peek over at some of the Q&A and the chat. So let's see here. Okay. But if I consolidate, so this is one that goes out to the Parent Plus loans. If I consolidate the Parent Plus with another Parent Plus, I lose the history, don't I? No, not, you don't lose that history, okay? And actually they take any history of the older loan, all right? So there's no history that you're at risk, this goes out to Rosario, of losing there, all right? Especially if they're both Parent Plus loans, okay? All right, let's see. For FFEL loans, do you apply for a waiver recount when applying for forgiveness or when applying for a direct consolidation loan? So great question. First, you need to consolidate that loan, okay? And then you need to submit the employment certification, all right? That's the PSLF form, quote, right? After you have consolidated, okay? All right, are there any benefits for Parent Plus loans during TEPSLF limited waiver or the recount? The only benefits I would say for Parent Plus loans are if you consolidate that Parent Plus loan with an older other type of loan, like if you have loans for yourself and you consolidate them together, they will take the credit count of the older loan. So let's say you have your own loans from 2010 that you've been paying on for a while, and you have more recent Parent Plus loans that you took out. And perhaps you'd have, close to 100 or so credits on those older loans that are for yourself. If you consolidate them all together, your Parent Plus loans will basically become and take the credit count of those other loans. So if you have Parent Plus loans and your own loans as well, you're going to want to consolidate those together, because you basically, it's sort of a hack of the system under this waiver. You are not going to start back at zero on those Parent Plus. You're going to start at whatever the credit count was on those older loans. I know that's a bit in the weeds. So if you have any additional questions, we can connect you to our support team, but definitely an advantage for anyone who has Parent Plus loans and an additional type of loan. Okay, let's see. Someone asked, once for several years, I was on an income-driven plan and my payments calculated at $25 a month for that period. Does that count? Absolutely, Carol. Yes, it does. You could actually have qualified for a $0 monthly payment, and those $0 payments would still count. We have many borrowers who were on a $0 monthly payment because of how low their income was, and each one of those $0 payments counted. All right. Okay, let's see. This one goes out to Greg, but Greg asks, is the application for PSLF still the same? Do I still need to send documents to my employers to confirm nonprofit status? Also, I've worked for the government for 5 years. Can I use my SF50s? So there's only one form, and it's that employment certification form. And so you will need to get that, or you will need to send that to your HR, former HR, have them sign off on it. Okay. You can literally Google PSLF employment certification form, and it should be the first thing that pops up, and you can get a copy of that form. We also have it in the Savi Help Center as well. And so you can't use any other type of confirmation or anything like that. There needs to be that form signed off by HR. All right. Okay. Let's see. Is there any way to see the PSLF credits you've accrued over the years on any of these servicer websites? Great question. This comes from Amber. So no, the only way that you can see the credits you've accrued is if you have Fed loan and you've submitted these applications before, you will be able to see them. If you, have never submitted a PSLF form before, you will need to submit that to Mohila, If your loans aren't with Mohila, they will move to Mohila. And then you will be able to see in your Mohila portal, because that's the only servicer that manages PSLF, you will be able to see how many credits you've accumulated. Okay. All right. If I have retired, does this program still apply to me? Yes, it absolutely can, because if you've made 120 payments up till that point or before you retired, you could be eligible for forgiveness right now. All right. So we have tons of retirees who have been able to get their loans forgiven because under the original rules of the program, they weren't eligible. But now that that's changed, they're able to retroactively apply. Okay. All right, let me take one or two more, and then I really want to make sure I'll try to make sure we get to some more at the end. But I want to, sort of show you a bit more about sort of the Savi tool and how to make sure you all are set up for success before the end of this session. Okay. Can we be completing the PSLF form while waiting for consolidation? Absolutely. Yes, you absolutely can. Yep. Okay, does the IRS tax lien or levy count towards payments? No, it does not. That does not count towards payments. All right. Let's see. Once you get the employment verification, what happens? You're going to want to send that to Mohila. Once you've gotten that signed off by your employer or employers, submit that to Mohila. We saw, anywhere from 1 to 3 months waiting time when it was with FedLoan. I'm not sure how fast Mohila is going to be processing this. They've just taken over the program. So you're going to want to submit that. Keep an eye out for communications from Mohila. Once that does, they will send you sort of a letter confirming that, your employment's eligible, and they will sort of update your status. And if your loans weren't with Mohila, they will be transitioned over to Mohila. And then you will have a part of your Mohila portal that you will basically be able to see how many credits they've given you. And then from there, every 12 months going forward, you're going to want to submit those an employment certification form for your current employer. So that way you are basically certifying 12 credits over 12 credits, tracking closer and closer to that 120. And even if you're with another servicer right now, you still want to send to Mohila. Okay, because that's what's basically going to transition and trigger your loans to move over to Mohila so that they can review and that you can start tracking towards the 120. All right, I'm going to pause there. I know we're getting a lot of questions coming through. I want to talk about how Savi can help you with this. All right, and I know there are a lot of Savi users currently on the line, but I want to make sure everyone's sort of aware of the role that we can help to play. So first and foremost, everyone can set up a free Savi account. And when you do, you are able to see a personalized repayment and forgiveness plan. So this is basically down to the cent as to what that new repayment and or forgiveness amount could be. We also, like I said, monitor for new programs and policy changes. So when these things are happening and going on, we make sure that we inform you first and foremost via email. And anything that's happening, you're going to hear it from us first. And then for those who decide to upgrade to our Savi premium plan, and depending upon what partnership or employer you're coming from, some of these employers or membership associations and groups have picked up or subsidized the cost of that premium plan for you. You can check with your HR membership to see or when you go to your Savi account, you'll be able to see what that pricing might be. But we basically take on all of the administrative burden for you. All right, so all of the paperwork and applications for these PSLF employment certification forms, we pre-fill, digitize them, send them to your HR for you, get the sign-offs, and then submit them to Mohila on your behalf. And you're also able to sort of receive personalized support from our student loan experts. So that's working sort of more closely one-on-one with our team of internal experts that are going to be able to help you sort of cross that finish line. So I wanted to just take a quick moment. I'm going to walk you through some of the other features around your Savi account that I just wanted to make everyone aware of that might be helpful as understanding how to sort of get through this process. All right, first and foremost, signing in. So there is a link that you should have received in your email if you are a new Savi user, but otherwise to log back into your account, you can head to app.bysavi.com/account/login. And I will type that in the chat right now if you want to paste this into your browser. You're more than welcome to follow along with me, or you can do this later on your own. But I just want to sort of show you some of the awesome new features around Savi that have come out, especially around this Pslf limited waiver. So first and foremost, your Savi dashboard. So this is going to sort of be like mission control for everything Savi. We've integrated and updated an entirely new employment certification progress bar, basically, where you're going to be able to track your ECF forms that we've submitted on your behalf, all of that right from your dashboard. So sort of here's a little bit of what that looks like here, right? So sort of your active applications, where they are in the process. You know, like I said, we're sending these off to the HR on your behalf. So we're managing and monitoring that process for you. And you're going to want to be able to connect, you know, and put in all of your employment here so you can manage that whole process through your Savi account. You can also register for our live and interactive workshops. So similar to the one you're attending here today, you can do that from the sidebar of your dashboard, register for any of the ones we've got coming up in the near future. You're also able to invite friends and family. And if you invite 3 friends or family, you actually can receive a 50% off discount code to use on that premium paid service, that essential plan. So for those of you who might not have it subsidized by your employer or membership group, it's a great way to be able to do that. You can also select your Savi plan. So here's where you can sort of upgrade or downgrade to be able to take advantage of those premium services. And when you're ready to get started with the Savi process, it's pretty easy. You're going to be able to start this sort of quote unquote general information where we basically collect information around your tax filing status, your income, and your employment. All of this to help us identify the optimal repayment and forgiveness plan for you. Now, this employment section is most important, especially for those who are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, because we're going to want to make sure that you add in all of your employment history here. Okay. So you can see here, this person is added in 3 previous employers. You're going to be added in the details around those employment, but that's going to be able to help us not only identify how much, you know, potentially you are eligible for, but also then initiate all of those employment certification forms for each of those employers. If by chance you are one of those borrowers who, based on the information you've entered into the tool, is now eligible for you know, forgiveness right now because you've reached 120 or more qualifying payments, we will let you know. All right, so you'll be able to see that through here. There's also a savings guarantee, which basically, depending upon the information, again, that you enter into the tool, if we identify that you could qualify for a lower monthly payment, we're going to guarantee it. So you can actually claim that money right now. The last step in the process is to sync your federal and or private loans. So we offer a loan sync through a technology called Plaid. If you have a Venmo account, you've used Plaid before to sync your accounts. It's fairly easy and straightforward. So let's say your servicer is Navient. You can select that, enter in your Navient username and password credentials, and it's going to sync over a read-only snapshot of that data. So it's not giving us access or anything like that, but just telling us things like the balance and the interest. These are critical for us to be able to ultimately give you that best estimate possible. Once you've synced those loans, and again, if you are potentially eligible at this point for immediate forgiveness, meaning you've reached the 120, you'll see a, you know, sort of a screen like this. So it's very interactive of what you'll see based on the information you're entering into the tool. Or let's say you aren't at the 120 yet. You are able to reach our plan options page. And this is where we show you basically what that monthly payment as well as potential forgiveness could look like. So for example, this new monthly payment is around $260, which is $126 less than your previous payment. You're going to be paying total over the course of your loan about $11,000 more dollars. However, in about 3 years and 8 months, you are going to be eligible to have about $49,000 forgiven. All right, so you can expand for more details, and that's going to basically show you other plans and things like that. Now, again, that Savi Essential membership If you decide to continue from there, you are going to be able to start all of the ECFs, employment certification forms, right? Those key PSLF forms that you need to submit for each of your employments, okay? You're also going to be able to set up your repayment plan. So repayments are scheduled to resume in September. You'll be able to do all of that through Savi and track all of that through your dashboard. And last but not least, customer support. So we have for essential members that premium service, you have the ability to initiate a conversation with our support team that you see here. Our response time is usually within 3 to 5 business days, if not less. And we will be able to sort of help and work with you one-on-one to resolve any issues, but make sure you've got all the information you need. For those that aren't premium or essential, you are able to interact with our help center for absolutely free. We've got some great content on there as well if you need help going through the process.